We're speaking with Marika Hamilton, an entrepreneur, a mother of two, and a woman who has survived a stage 3 cancer diagnosis. Welcome to the Illuminations Media Network, Marika.
Thank you, and thank you for having me.
Oh, it is my absolute pleasure. You have a very important message to share with women and men out there, anyone who's facing a life-threatening diagnosis. But because you're brand new to the Illuminations Media Network family, I'd love for you to share a bit about yourself and your background, please.
Yeah, absolutely. I am a sort of a serial entrepreneur going back to 6th grade on the school bus selling candy to the other kids. It's just something I've always loved to do. I'm a mother of two, very, very happily married. We have a series of chain of restaurant locations here in Indiana, and just business and creating things has always just been a passion of mine, and that's pretty much who I am.
Beautiful. Well, you have a full life, and you are a very, very successful individual who pushes through and makes things happen. Now, please tell us about your story. You a shocking diagnosis.
Yeah, it really was. I didn't have any of the risk factors. I had no family history. Like I said, no other risk factors that would indicate that, I would expect to receive a cancer diagnosis. And maybe that's the way it is with a lot of people. I'm a non-smoker. We're relatively active. We were not overweight. We eat well, eat a lot better now, but we ate pretty well back then. So really this was really just completely out of the blue. And kind of an interesting story. I sort of became an early adopter of getting mammograms, and I started, kind of early at the age 38. And for me, it was kind of like, giving myself an atta girl, because I was doing something sort of like getting a flu shot to be proactive in regards to protecting my health. And I had them every year. And so every time I got my mammogram back, the results were the same. They rate them on a scale of 1 to 5, and I came back a 1, which is the best, 5 being the worst. No evidence of cancer, no change from mammogram to mammogram. I thought I felt a lump in my breast, and I did what any of us would do. What we're told to do is I immediately made an appointment with my doctor and went in to get it checked out. My doctor, took a look at the lump and told me, this doesn't really seem to be anything to be worried about, just normal changes in breast tissue. I'm not that concerned. So with the insurance that I already had, 3 mammograms at that point, all telling me that I was completely clear of cancer, and a doctor that told me that, this lump was nothing to be worried about, I just carried on with life. Well, about 9 months after that, I was scheduled for my next mammogram, and I went in and I got the test results back, and they were exactly the same as the other ones. I was rated a 1, no evidence of cancer, no change from prior mammogram. So that was comforting. A few days after that, however, it was a Sunday night. We were going to bed, and I reached over to give my husband a kiss, and my right hand just kind of grazed across my left breast. And I felt this sense of dread just shoot through my body. And it was such a profound moment for me that even today, and every time I tell this story, it literally makes the hair on my arms stand up straight. It was that intense of an experience. And I was confused momentarily by it because I didn't understand why I felt this way all of a sudden. And then all of a sudden I realized it's when my hand had touched my breast that this had occurred. And I looked at my husband, and it was Sunday, and I said, tomorrow I'm calling the doctor. I'm going back in. Now, this was 3 or 4 days after receiving my last mammogram results saying everything was fine. Went back to the doctor. We went through the normal procedures there, and by Friday I had a diagnosis.
Wow. That was quite an experience. That was your intuition speaking to you.
Oh, my God. Yes, it was. And I have, if I respect and honor and try to hone one thing in my journey back to health, it's listening to our own divine intelligence and what our bodies are oftentimes screaming at us to get our attention, but we're so busy with our lives and our days that really our body is no more than an inconvenience to us that stops us from doing the things that we want to do. And that's really a huge lesson for me, and a message that I try and really reach other people with is that, when you have aches and pains, when you have swelling, when you have acne, when you have dandruff, constipation, no matter what it is, this is how your body communicates to you. And you can medicate and you can ignore, but, eventually you got to pay the piper.
That's right.
Yeah, it was very interesting for me when I look back, because about 2 to 3 months before any of this actually came to light, meaning that I already had cancer but just was not aware yet. I went down this road with, all of a sudden I was very passionate about getting our wills in order, making sure my husband was a signer on all the bank accounts, making sure he was a signer with the payroll company. When I went through all of our stuff to make sure that we were both signers on absolutely everything and that all these details are squared away. And it's kind of frightening looking back now, because I think my body was almost at a point where it had just decided that it was never going to get my attention. And so these are the things that it was leading to do. So that's kind of, I can't even explain how I feel about that now, but I was very diligent and paying attention to those types of things, but not paying attention to, other things in my life that, my body was trying to get my attention for sure.
Right. And someone out there listening might say, my goodness, you did pay attention. You were proactive about getting the recommended exams. When you found a problem, you went straight to your doctor, and you listened to what the doctor told you, that there was nothing to worry about. And you did do what you needed to do on a physical level. But then that intuition guided you to get your affairs in order.
That's exactly right. And to look at me, you would have never known I was ill. And the scary part about it is that after they did the biopsy and found the tumor, they went back and based on the size of the tumor in my breast, they had estimated that I had cancer for 6 to 8 years. 6 to 8 years I was walking around and just didn't know. So I just hadn't been diagnosed yet. And I think that's, and actually the radiologist went back to look at my mammograms, and they said, now we know what and where we're looking, we can see the cancer, which wasn't much of a consolation to me at that point, because any way you go about it, getting a cancer diagnosis sucks. I mean, it does, and that's putting it lightly. But if you're going to get diagnosed, for goodness sakes, catch it at stage 1 or stage 2. You don't want to be caught at stage 3 like I was.
Right. So it just sounds like, the story that we want to get from life, if we listen to life, because it's always speaking to us, to not just listen to what the doctors say and what your body is telling you on the physical level. Listen to what you're guided to do in your life.
Well, that's become a big part of my healing, and I look at things completely differently now, and I have the utmost respect for where I'm being intuitively or divinely led, and sometimes we have these random passing thoughts that sort of shift through our consciousness, and sometimes you think they're just coincidental, or you can chalk them up to all types of things, but I have found that when I can be still and when I can be quiet, I will have thoughts come to me that I believe now are purposeful. They are asking me to do something, or they're giving me ideas, or, it's like if you can open yourself up to the possibility of these conscious thoughts that are sort of passing through actually being your divine guidance, the path just opens up in front of you. It's an amazing, transformative thing when you get that.
It's so very true. If we can, in our very busy lives, to just, even if we take 10 minutes a day, would you say, Marika, just to be still and to notice.
I would say absolutely. we should be checking in with our bodies because we disregard our bodies. And let me tell you, my life now is about putting my body number one priority list. And I did an interesting exercise, and this is sort of getting into the intuition side of things. I was reading this book. It's a great book. It's called Mind Over Medicine by the author's name is Lissa Rankin. And one of her exercises in the back of the book is to have your disease write you a letter, and you write back and forth, you dialogue back and forth. And I thought it was kind of hokey, and I thought, well, what the heck am I going to write? So, I grabbed my legal pad and a pen, and my husband was reading a book next to me, and we're both sitting in bed, and I start writing, and I'm like, okay, so dear Cancer, what's up? I didn't know what to write. I stuck with it, and all of a sudden, it just started flowing from me. And what I wrote, which is what I say that my cancer wrote to me, was that I was okay. I just needed to quit worrying, quit being so fearful of the circumstances I was in, and start living life. And that kind of freaked me out. So I wrote back to Cancer, and I was like, well, what does that mean I'm okay? Does that mean I don't have cancer anymore? Does that mean I'm a cancer survivor? Does that mean I stopped doing what I'm doing? What if I stop doing all the things I'm doing and cancer comes back? And I just had all these series of questions that kind of flowed out of me. And so it was Cancer's turn to dialogue, and Cancer wrote and said, wait a second, you got to slow down. And it said, you have to keep things in perspective. You're no longer doing the things that you're doing every day to beat cancer. You're doing what you're doing every day so you can live a long, healthy life. And then these next words it said to me was another sort of hair on the back of the neck. I could feel them start to go up right now before I even tell you. It said these words to me, Marika, do you need me in your life in order to justify making yourself the priority?
Wow.
Yeah. And I had probably 3 or 4 pages, and I'm sort of, paraphrase that down. And I handed this legal pad over to my husband, and I said, hey, read this. So he read it, and he looked at me, and he goes, holy crap, that's intense. And he goes, did you just write that? And I go, yeah. I know. And it was kind of one of those moments where I realized my entire life, and I think this applies specifically to women, but to men as well. When do we really give ourselves permission to become the priority in our own life? And I can tell you without any hesitation, it took a cancer diagnosis for me to be able to give myself permission to be a priority.
That was the purpose. It's said that everything that shows up in our lives has a purpose for us. There is a reason for it being there. And amazingly, through this exercise, you found out why it was there. You mentioned that your family is healthier now than you've ever been. So what were some of the changes that you made? Did you make changes to your diet?
Well, that's kind of a complicated answer, and I'll start by saying this. I was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer. Because of what I explained before, because I had the mammograms and I trusted them, because I went to the doctor and trusted them, it's probably not too difficult to see that I was a little skeptical of their treatment from that point forward.
Sure.
So ultimately, in the end, I declined conventional treatment. So I said no to chemo, no to radiation, no to hormone therapy. I did have a lumpectomy. I did have the surgery very early on, just a couple weeks after I was diagnosed. So that was a really, really scary time. And I believe that your intuition will guide you towards what direction you need to go to heal. So I don't have any problem with anybody else making other choices than I did, and I hope they don't have a problem with my choice. But the way I looked at it is that I was already really let down by trusting, the conventional medical, procedures. And when I looked and listened to what they were proposing from me for treatment, chemo one of the side effects is it's carcinogenic, meaning it can cause cancer. Radiation, we know, causes cancer. And the hormone therapy they wanted to put me on also had a side effect of creating cancer. And I wasn't looking to trade cancers. I just wanted to be cancer-free. And so
right.
to me, to give a body that already has broken down to the point to develop cancer, treatments that cause cancer, I couldn't really get my head wrapped around that. So that was one thing for me. The other thing for me is that my intuition was screaming at me that it was going to kill me. And to enter into any kind of treatment, I mean, you got to have your head in the right place. You have to believe in what you're doing. I couldn't enter into that treatment really with my gut telling me that it was going to kill me. So, those were all really, really heavy things on my mind, and ultimately why I decided to decline conventional treatment. And, the other thing was, too, is that I was only given, with taking those conventional treatments, I was only given a 61% chance of 5-year survival. And, flipping a coin.
Certainly. And you were not going to add to that. Like you said, you weren't going to trade one cancer for another.
No, I certainly didn't. And, I had this conversation with my mom and dad because it was emotionally, it was a really rough time because from a place of love, those in my life, my husband was, right on board with me, and so were my girls. But outside of that, my family, out of love, was, for lack of better words, they were kind of freaking out. They assumed that by declining conventional treatment that I was going to, crawl up under the desk and say, okay, I'm done, I'm going to die. And that that was going to be it, and they were terrified, and that was one of the harder things, and it was kind of through one of those things, those experiences that I learned a really great lesson from cancer. I had my mom and dad came back. They don't live here where I do all the time. They came back kind of right through the throes of this, and they really wanted me to do chemo. They were terrified, and I didn't want to. So it kind of became like this 800-pound gorilla in the room that was on everybody's mind, but nobody wanted to bring it up because our thoughts were so opposing on the topic. And my parents were leaving the next morning, and my mom and I were sitting in the family room, and TV was on in the background, and they were leaving the very next day, and nobody was really talking. We were just sitting there, and all of a sudden, I got up from my chair, and I went over in front of my mom's chair, and I got down on my knees, and I just laid my head in her lap, and I sobbed, and she cried as well. And I realized at that moment that this was such a core brokenness in me that I had gone back to my parents as the last possible default, as a fully adult woman, as a way of just hoping they could fix this. And I had this realization, and they did as well, I think, at that time, that they couldn't fix this. This is out of their control. And we cried and cried and cried. And I realized at that time that there are worse things than being a cancer patient. The worst thing is being the parent of a cancer patient. The worst thing is being the spouse of someone that has cancer and being that caregiver and the helplessness you have to what's going on in that other person's body. And it was a very poignant time for me, very real. And cancer's been a gift to me in far more many ways than it's ever been a liability. And although I would never want to go back and do it all again, because let me tell you, there's been a lot of dark times, I would never want to undo it. My life today is the best that it's ever been. And even if I died tomorrow, I would feel like I'm going out on a high note. I am just so on fire, so passionate, and so alive. I'm more alive than before I knew I had cancer.
And so what are some of the changes you made because of the cancer. What did it motivate you to do for yourself?
Oh my gosh. Well, and I don't suggest this, I'll just put it this way. I've made radical lifestyle changes, and I don't expect other people to do this because I know that it took cancer for me to make some of these changes. I mean, so I myself wouldn't do it unless the threat was really, really real. But cancer is kind of one of these things where we all live in denial, and it's something that always happens to other people. And then you get a moment like I did for me, where it's like, holy shit, I am the other people. I have cancer. And so it hits close to home. And it is predicted in our country today that 1 out of 2 men and 1 out of 3 women are predicted to get a cancer diagnosis in their lifetime. So that's a pretty astounding number. And I was giving a talk the other week to a fairly large group of people, and I asked a couple questions. I asked them to raise their hand if they knew anyone that had been diagnosed with cancer. And not surprisingly, every single person in the room raised their hand. The next thing I asked them, which shocked me and it shocked the audience, I asked them to keep their hand raised if they had someone in their family that had been diagnosed with cancer. And every single hand stayed raised. And that is a startling view. I mean, we all know that, the cancer rates are very, very high and happening to more and more people around us. But to see a whole room of people that in their family they have someone that has cancer was really a stunning thing for me. So to get back to your question, cancer is real. And when you get a cancer diagnosis, you feel as though you've been kind of cut from the herd, and you look out your window and the rest of the world is sort of, ants scurrying by on their daily missions, running to the grocery store, picking up the dry cleaning, and going to work, and all of a sudden you feel like cut out and disconnected, and none of that matters to you anymore. So you have a couple of choices. You can kind of curl up and die, or you can get really, really proactive about ensuring your body's health, and that's kind of the road I went down. I was prepared to do anything I could to make my body's job easy as possible so that I could have my best chance of healing. And really, I had to become an expert on my own health because I became my own doctor. I became my own patient because I declined conventional treatment. So I had to take it pretty seriously. I mean, my life depended on it. So pretty much immediately I got my diagnosis, we started doing, massive amounts of research. One of the first things we cut out was meat, animal products. That was gone right off the top. And I'm sure your listeners won't be surprised by that. There's already a lot of talk about that, the China study and so on, and the burden that eating meat and all that protein puts on our system. So that was gone for me, like right from the get-go. But overnight, I stopped any type of sugar, any type of processed food, any type of oil, no more coffee, no more alcohol, no meat, as I mentioned. Of course, that includes no milk. And I got pretty much down to I don't want to say a vegan diet, I guess would be what it is, but pretty much more to the point, I think it was closer to a raw foods diet. I mean, that's pretty much what I ate. And that was a huge change. I mean, a huge, huge change. But a really great start to get me off in the right direction.
You have a saying that health doesn't happen to you. It's something that you create. And so you are on a mission to create this. So you made changes to your diet, and all of the studies point to the fact that nutrition is definitely a way to get our health in the right direction. What are some other obstacles to healing?
Well, I'll follow up to what you just said, and this was sort of the straw that broke the camel's back for me and my husband. The last question, because I did go to the oncologist, obviously, to see what their treatment was going to be. I mean, I wanted to make an informed decision about what direction we were going. The last question my husband asked the doctor was, "What role does nutrition play in her healing?" The answer that we got back was this: "It's not really a factor we consider." But that was from the oncologist.
Wow.
Nutrition was not really a factor they considered in me getting well. And that was like the last words we heard out of his mouth. And I just, I think we're born and raised to know that we need to eat well. We need to eat healthy food to expect to be healthy people. And to say that nutrition isn't a factor in someone recovering from a devastating, disease like cancer, I can't even understand it. I mean, it blows my mind.
And that is amazing, to think that a field that is all about, supposedly, the medical field is all about healing and health, that they would miss that piece.
Right. Well, doctors don't have a lot of studies in nutrition anyway, and oncologists aren't really schooled in nutrition. They're schooled in oncology, which is prescribing and delivering, this cancer medication. So it's sort of there's just a disconnect there, where, it's just a different world for them. That's just not something they really factor in, because they're just looking at the hard numbers and you know what, to be honest, a lot of people aren't willing, and that's fine. My daughter told me, she's 15 once, and I was telling her about something I couldn't eat or that I had to eat, I don't remember which, and she said to me, she goes, "Oh my gosh, Mom," she goes, "I could never do that." And I looked at her and I said, it's amazing what you can and what you're willing to do when the alternative is dying. And she looked at me and she goes, "Yeah, I guess you're right." So, it's there's hard choices to make, and the problem is that when with conventional treatment, they're looking at treating my cancer, but they don't look at nutrition, nor do they really look at any of the other stuff going on in my body or my life that could be contributing towards my body creating the symptom of cancer. So, that was another kind of problem for me as well. So, in my opinion, you can treat the cancer with chemo, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like I said, people do get, cured or go into remission from following that, and praise the Lord. I mean, I'm thankful. But in my mind, if you're going to, go through chemo and still smoke cigarettes, there's a pretty big disconnect going on. If you're going to go through chemo and then go right back to your terrible, stressful job, you're creating a situation where more problems are going to occur down the road.
Very true. Now, you mentioned stress, and what happens during that fear and that anxiety that creates the stress response? It seems that is counterproductive to health, is it not?
Oh my gosh, yes. And I would say, fear is one of the main motivators in mankind's behavior. I mean, I think it's love and fear. I mean, we're just always motivated between those two things. And fear, I realized very early on, was something I had to get a handle on. It's such a scary. I don't know why cancer, seems worse than any other disease, because really it's not. I mean, anytime you have any kind of condition that's going to either, become the ending of your life or take your life in such a direction that you can't live it to its fullest, there's no differentiation in my mind. I mean, it's all disease. It doesn't matter what you want to call it. And sometimes I feel, people that have diabetes and other conditions, it's like that's sort of like downplayed and all the attention is given to cancer. And it's, long and short, it's all disease. If it affects you living your life, it's all the same thing. So, stress is a huge part of that. And stress is a choice. And we either choose to keep on living a lifestyle that is going to create a stressful condition, or we choose to make a change. And I realized that I had to make a change. I had to make a change in not only what I was doing in an occupational sense, but I had to get a hold of the fear and the uncertainty that are the constant companions when you have a traumatic diagnosis. It's overwhelming, and I don't know, and I won't know until I die. I don't know if it ever goes away, but you think about cancer every single day. And what happens is that, first of all, when you are given a diagnosis like that, where you see sort of the end of your life in much clearer focus than you'd like to, fear is is kind of cancer's evil like twin. That not only you're at a point in time where you should be relishing every moment, right? Because you really don't know how much longer you have left. Not that any of us do, but when you get that, we all think we're going to live forever until we get cancer. But at the very time where you should be really enjoying yourself and being in the moment, the fear makes that impossible. The distraction of cancer, it gets a stranglehold in your life, and it's really hard to even focus on what you do have left, which is what any of us have, is just the time, being in this present moment, being here now. So, I realized that I had to get a handle on the stress, because what happens is that, in a primitive sense, when we have this stress response, it's no different from the lion, chasing the gazelle, and the gazelle has the stress response. It becomes, as we all know, the fight or flight response that our bodies just do automatically. And your body isn't too worried about your reproductive systems or growing hair or your immune system it's not worried about those types of things when you're in that stress response. So it automatically dumbs down those things that are irrelevant to, surviving being chased by that lion, and puts all its attention elsewhere. So in our modern lifestyle, we have normally stress responses all day long, to the, irate phone call you took, to getting yelled at by your boss, to getting stuck in traffic, or being late to pick the kids up from soccer. Every one of those mild stress responses is, in a primitive way, doing the same thing to your nervous system. It's dumbing down the most important parts, like your immune system, and sending that adrenaline and that cortisol coursing through your body, and you're having these stress responses which are prohibiting your body from healing and staying healthy. So for me, that had to be one of the first things I tackled, is not only eliminating the stress, but figuring out how I can handle, this stress response I had specifically to do with this diagnosis, so that I wasn't hampering my own body's ability to heal.
Excellent. Well, it's important that we would check in, as we spoke of earlier in the conversation, that meditation of taking that time to let go and to connect with self. Did you find yourself in that state more often?
Yes. I take time every day now to connect to myself. And, some of the choices that are presented to you are maybe not choices that you want to consider or that you want to choose. But it really comes down to how serious are you about getting well, because sometimes it really does come down to quitting that job, or, getting it out of a relationship, or moving to a smaller house. Those things are all, really, really important to overall health, in addition to making sure you have that time to sort of have that communion with your own body. Because if you're not willing to keep your body a priority, and you're not willing to really care for it and give it what it needs, this might be a shock, but it is the only vehicle in which you can stay on this plane to be with the people that you love.
Right.
And so for me, every choice I make, is this helping or hurting my chances of staying healthy? Because, it's not really about staying alive. It's that I want to live. I want to feel good. And thankfully I feel fantastic, which is, just a blessing beyond anything I could ever imagine.
Well, Marika, you have been there, and I know that everyone listening, as you said, has either experienced the cancer diagnosis in the past, the present, the future, and they also know others who perhaps have and perhaps will in the future experience this. But because you've been there, you have developed a coaching system so that you support others through this process. Please tell us about that and how people can connect with you in order to get the support they need from someone who knows.
Yeah, absolutely. As I said before, this is my mission, and I'm kind of right now as we speak, I'm having a hair standing up on my arms experience, getting to share this with you and your listeners. I want to help you stay healthy. I want to be the ghost of Christmas future, to show you, this could happen to you. it's not just other people. This could happen to you. And your time to be proactive and protective of your most important, valuable asset, your health, is today. And you can start by making little changes. And I am just on fire to share the wealth of knowledge that I've gained to keep myself alive. And I want to make sure that everybody has this information. My website is www.dealingwithhealing.com. And you can certainly sign up for my newsletter there. You can also find me on Facebook under Marika Hamilton. Like my page, and you'll make sure you get my videos. I have a series of tip videos, and I've also created a program called 7 Tips to Accelerated Health to help people get a good start. And whether you're in the middle of a health crisis or you're just really stepping up to be proactive, and God bless you if you are, because I sure wish I would have been more proactive. This is going to give you some good stuff to get you started in a great, solid direction. And this isn't about doing what I did, because I had no choice but to get pretty radical with my own care. But this is about giving you sort of an a la carte spread of options of little ways that you can choose things that you can work into your lifestyle that can help maybe change your course just a little bit to help maybe in the future avert a health crisis.
So where should listeners begin? I would say they should begin by going to dealingwithhealing.com and connect with you right away.
Yeah, that would be great. There's a big community out there, and this message is not unique to me. There's lots of people that are stepping up, that are sort of changing and shifting and being a resource and a support structure to other people going through this. I obviously offer a one-on-one coaching with my clients, and I do group coaching. I created Dealing with Healing, the foundation, so that I can provide work free of charge to local cancer resource centers. So we go through a lot of that. We work on tools on how to deal with the fear, because that's priority with any of my clients, is that we have to deal with what I consider to be the post-traumatic stress disorder that results from not only receiving a traumatic diagnosis, but going through the treatments and then living with the day-to-day realities of having cancer. But there's lots of great ways to get started, and I would say, get signed up for my newsletter and take you step by step. And these aren't about tricky things, and I'm never saying that my way is the right way. What I always encourage my listeners and my readers to do is, number one, you got to take responsibility for your own health and quit handing that over to someone wearing a white coat that's going to give you a prescription to cover up a symptom. You have to take responsibility for it, and that comes from wanting to make that change. And not everybody's ready to do that, but for those that are, there are resources out there, and I'd love to connect with your listeners that are passionate about this too. And really what it comes down to, okay, forget about all of us that are alive right now. What's most important is that we can provide better instruction, better prepare our next generation so that they have a better chance to be and live and make healthier choices. I have 2 daughters, 18 and 15, as I mentioned. My goal with them and my excitement comes from these 2 young women that will grow up, get married, have children, and perhaps be part of the first generation where running to prescription drugs isn't the first answer to everything. Where the first generation where the importance of not eating just processed and packaged food, and we have the ability to just transform what's going to happen after our generation is gone.
We certainly do. Beautiful. Well said. You have a mission that's going to change the world. Our luminary, Marika Hamilton. Marika, thank you so much for joining us here on the Illuminations Media Network. And our listeners are going to join you right there on Dealing with Healing. Until next time, here on the Illuminations Media Network, this is your host, Tamara Tiesi, signing off. Peace and blessings.